When someone is preparing for college, they have to think about financing. And what should mom and dad be thinking about right now, dealing with banks or looking for grants or scholarships? Want to talk about that a little?
Sure. Being honest early is really helpful. In other words, if you're a mom or dad and you know that you have X amount of money to spend on your child's education, it's really helpful to put that on the table early and say, this is what we can do to help. Because if a student knows that earlier, for instance, they can spend the summers of their sophomore, junior, and senior year of high school working more, perhaps, and to make money so that they can help add to that pot. The other thing, however, is that colleges have a sticker price and then colleges have a discount rate. And so whereas the sticker price might be $40,000 for a particular college, most of the students are going to get some kind of aid. And so looking at what the average is, and assuming that we're all average, that's the average that you'll pay. Certainly if you have a higher income, you're going to pay more. If you have a lower income, you might pay less. And so the sticker price is not the actual price. The sticker price is the sticker price. If you're a very wealthy family, that's what you're going to pay. But if you're somewhere in the middle, it's going to be a discount rate, and you're more likely to pay that. And why that's important is because you don't want to write off colleges because you automatically see the sticker price and then say, oh, we're not even going to look at that place. Know that most colleges have a good deal of both in-house financial aid, and depending on what state you're in, New York State has TAP, very helpful to many students who are eligible. And the government has federal funds, say a Pell Grant, for those eligible. And you also have loans. And there's lots of loans, and it gets really complicated, so we won't go deeply into it. But there are lots of places which will offer students loans. And again, I always tell students a loan and a grant, big difference. Because a loan is part of what you're paying now or later. Somebody's paying it. And so it's important to know that and ask a lot of questions.
Are there grants or scholarships available that students can apply for?
Sure. There's a couple of different kinds. We have merit scholarships. Most schools have scholarships geared toward particularly bright students. We want the brighter students in the classroom because they're going to raise the bar for everybody else. And so colleges tend to give them a little bit more money to entice them to come to that school. And those are, say, in-house grants. A place might have what we call a presidential scholarship or a Franciscan scholarship, different levels of scholarship. And those will be all articulated very clearly on college's website. And so that's the second thing parents need to do about finances, is they should be scouring the website of the college, specifically their catalog or their financial aid website, because there's a lot of information. And we're required to put it there by the government, so it has to be there. But ask a lot of questions.
You made we were talking about it this morning, a very interesting comment to me the other day. You said that someone who gets a degree online from a college, they have a degree in accounting or business administration or whatever, but they didn't go to college. Would you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I guess it's a pretty bold statement. Online learning is certainly taking off, and I think it's going to become increasingly normative, if not completely online learning, but maybe a hybrid where you're online and you're in the college on certain days of the semester, or some classes online, some classes in person. It's going to happen whether we like it or not, and whether it's good or bad. It's going to happen, and is happening. However, if you're doing your degree online, you're not getting the college experience. And that's not just the social experience of hanging out with one's friends and one's cohorts and dealing with those obstacles. It's also the experience of hitting those obstacles, overcoming them. It's the experience of having this one-on-one conversation with a faculty member or an advisor and learning from that experience. It's the experience of failing and then having to come back and do it again the next semester. The maturation that goes on in college is probably the most important part. Learning a good skill set, which you learn by that interaction, which you learn by working in groups, which you learn by having to give a formal presentation perhaps in class, which many colleges do. You lose that if you're doing something exclusively online. With that said, there's great value, particularly online, for students who can't make it to a school, who have to work many hours a week and they can't be full-time, who have a certain number of credits but they're trying to fill in the gaps so they can get a degree because they're married, they have kids, they want to move on with their life, if you will. I think online learning is very helpful, and it's going to be a very good asset, but it'll be a shame to lose what we call the college experience.
Now, mom and dad, when the student transitions from high school into college, the relationship changes. It does not remain the same. Mom and dad are supportive, but there are changes there. I want to talk about that relationship a little bit.
Sure, and it changes in several ways and dynamically in some. In high school, parents tend to be in close contact, some parents, we hope more, in contact with the school, with guidance counselors, with teachers. And so they might be on the phone, they can show up, they can sit down. Many schools have an open door policy after classes. They can come in and talk to anybody there. In college, the student has a lot more responsibility. So for instance, most professors in college won't even talk to parents. Even if the student says, you can talk to my mom, they'll say, you know, that's not what I do. I teach, I'll counsel you, I'll work with you, I'll advise you. But someone else will have to do that. And that's part of what I do in my office. I talk to parents a lot. And the reason why faculty do that is because they want to develop that professional relationship between themselves and the student. According to federal law, what's called FERPA, we can't tell the parents anything about their sons or daughters' experience at the college, with the exception that they're there and what their major is. A couple of things which are called directory information. We can't tell them their grades. We can't tell them if they're going to class. We can't tell them if they've been out late. We can't tell them anything, with a couple of exceptions as are set forward in the law. And parents need to get, that's very surprising. Of course, they're paying the bills in most cases, and so they feel they have a right to that information. And according to the law, they don't. But we encourage students, certainly, to share that information. I mean, good communication between students and parents, and between ourselves and parents, is very helpful. And so often, in almost every case, I'll say to a student, your parents are interested to know what your grades are, how engaged you are, can I tell them? Most of the times they say, sure, that's not a problem. In a few cases, you have families where one or both parents are not in a relationship with the student, so the student doesn't want that information out there, and that's why it's there, to protect them. In terms of the length of the semester, that's another big surprise for both parents and students. If you're in high school, the parents and students think they have, the whole course of the year from September or August until June to get things right, to figure things out, to get things straight. And the truth is, the semester is 3 months long, basically. We start on Tuesday and we end, say, we start on the first Tuesday in September after Labor Day, and then the semester ends the first Monday in December, and it's over. It's 3 months. And that takes some getting used to.
That's a surprise. Yes. One thing I found when I transitioned from high school to college, because I went to college locally, my parents pretty much were like keeping an eye on me and made sure that I did what I was supposed to do and performed like I should. And you said that seems to be, for those who go locally, it's pretty much the same case, but for the student out of town, they have a certain amount of independence, and they have to use that independence responsibly, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. One
of the things that's interesting, and it's changed since I was in college in the 80s, how it's changed is that the parents aren't there, clearly, if a student is living on a campus, and so they're not seeing the whole day, but the communication between the students and parents now is much higher than it was when I was in college. And so they're on their phones, all day long, texting with their parents, calling their parents, FaceTiming their parents. And so the average student, I'd say, in college probably does that 3 or 4 times a day now, whereas in the past, we didn't do that at all. And that's not to say the parents are involved in everything about what's going on at the school. A small percentage of students at various schools, will get into a little trouble socially. They'll stay out too late. They'll take part in activities which are not conducive to their health or to their academic success. And eventually, the parents will find that out if they come home with bad grades or if they get removed from the college for violating some policies. But it can be a challenge if you're far away. So you're 1,000 miles away from your son or daughter's school. You basically have to hope that you chose the right place. You have to have a good contact there. That's part of what I do, that you can call or email if you have questions. And you really have to keep the lines of communication open between your son and daughter. It's really important.
Now, you're sharing with me that some kids in their first year, they get homesick. In fact, you shared a story with me about a girl who would Zoom home to her family every week, and they lived in New York State, and eventually that sort of went away, the homesickness. Why don't you talk about that a little?
Yeah, her name was Meg. It's a great story because she was probably one of the most homesick students that I've encountered, but really working with it, which is different than students who are homesick and that's it, they just leave. And so she was very vocal, she communicated, her parents were well aware of it. I was her teacher at the time, I was aware of it, and we talked about it a lot. And because those lines of communications were open, she was able to slowly ease into it. She would go home, she'd come back, she'd go home, she'd come back, and then One weekend she'd stay there. Perhaps she'd meet her parents in between for lunch on one weekend. And then eventually she became more connected. She felt better about herself, felt better about her surroundings, and graduated, went to graduate school in Arizona, and is doing well right now.
It all turned out well.
It turned out well. And recognizing the signs of that is really important for schools. And so as colleges open at the beginning of a school year, they'll be looking for students who are disconnected or stuck in their room or eating alone. And other students and administrators are trained to say hello and sit down and see how things are going. And sometimes they're fine. But that absolutely happens, especially those that go far away.
That has to make you feel pretty good that you were able to help a human being. I'm just saying that as a human being, feel you were able to help someone get through it, and they're so successful now because of you.
That's the best part of the job. It really is. The ability to have those connections and then see the success, especially when that success comes from an area of challenge or obstacles. And it feels really good.
We only have a few moments left, and there are so many issues to consider. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about making the transition from a high school to college, or maybe re-emphasize?
Sure. I think re-emphasizing the fit aspect is really important. So finding a school which is not A, the cheapest, or B, the closest, or C, it happens to have your major. There should be a lot of components that go into choosing the school that's the right fit for me. The second part is that grit aspect of having a focus, having a desire, putting a lot of work into it. I think students underestimate the quantity of work it takes. So if you're coming from a high school into college and you were a pretty good student in high school, you're probably going to have to work at least twice as much to get the same grades, and you have a lot of freedom. And that leads me to my last point, which I think is probably an important point not to leave out, is the management of one's time. Learning how to manage one's time, using calendars, using to-do lists, using reminders, having one's phone or clock go off to tell you need to do something. It's really helpful. I mean, we all know that in the business world, we need reminders. We need to know where we're supposed to be in the next hour or the next minute. And it's a great skill. And the sooner students learn that, the more successful they'll be.
What is the role of a faculty advisor at Siena College or any college for a student?
They do several things. One of the things they do is to give the students a specific person to connect with, to ask questions of, perhaps to have lunch with, who is connected with their major or their own interests. Advisors will engage students in conversation about their academic programs, especially those that are unsure, so to help them navigate that. Advisors will recommend particular tracks or courses, say within a particular major. They'll recommend classes, perhaps. They'll also check the students' choices for their classes and empower them to make good decisions.
Why do you feel it's so important for a student when they go to college to do more than just attend class, to get involved? Like if you're taking business, for example, get involved with the business club, or why do you feel that's so important?
Sure. I mean, part of that goes back to the management of one's day. There's a lot of free time in college, and so if you're a typical college student, you probably have 15 hours of class a week. That's not a lot of time. I mean, you're used to having 7 times 7 hours a week, and so we're talking 15 hours a week in classroom. And so you need to organize and manage your time. The students who have a part-time job, who have a club on campus, who are in sports, they're doing athletics, they tend to be the students where their days are, part of their days are organized for them. And so that helps a lot to organize the rest of their time.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. And how can folks get in touch with you, Dr. Peter Ellard?
They can send me an email at pellard, that's P-E-L-L-A-R-D, @siena.edu. And I'd be happy to talk to them.
Our guest is Dr. Peter Ellard. He's the Associate Vice President of Academic Affairs at Siena College in Loudonville, and you've been with the college since 1999.
That is true.
I want to thank you so much for joining us. We've all learned a lot from you.
It's been great to be here.
Okay.